Alrighty, well, good morning.
Good morning.
It's dreary outside, but it's mighty fine inside here. We're glad to have an opportunity to dive into God's Word and seek what we shall from the Lord through His Word to us. Let's begin with a word of prayer. God, we give you thanks for this life that you've granted us and the grace that's new every morning. We ask that you open our eyes and open our hearts that we might hear your word to us and we might bear it well within our hearts and bring it to the world that so desperately needs to hear from you. Help us to lead lives that show our great appreciation and thanks for you. And it's in your name we pray. Amen. So we begin today chapter 13 in 2 Samuel. We're going to move through some, needless to say, some very difficult passages today. The point in time in David's life, though we see a great gulf between the person who Saul was and the person who David is, we see in David's life the repercussions of sin. We see how people's lives change and how it's not so much personalities, but the drive that they have. You know, the hallmarks of a person in one part of their life can change. We saw a mighty warrior and a humble king move to someone who, through this past passages we looked at, moved through a very serious time of sin and repentance. And now there are repercussions coming forth from this. Nathan prophesied that there would be great difficulty in David's house, but that there would also be, Nathan also prophesied, that David's familial line would be blessed, and that ultimately, as we saw, the Messiah would come through the line of David. So these passages we're going to see are going to be difficult. They're going to be, they're not at all like the great inspirational passages we saw with David defeating Goliath and so on. But we move through them so that we have a greater understanding of the entirety of the story that is David, the slow and steady triumph that is the life of David, both the good and the bad. So we begin in chapter 13. In the course of time, Amnon, son of David, fell in love with Tamar, the beautiful sister of Absalom, son of David. Amnon became frustrated at the point of illness on account of his sister Tamar, for she was a virgin and it seemed impossible for him to do anything to her. Now Amnon had a friend named Jonadab, son of Shimea, David's brother. Jonadab was a very shrewd man. He asked Amnon, "Why do you, the king's son, look so haggard morning after morning? Won't you tell me?" Amnon said to him, "I'm in love with Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister." "Go to bed and pretend to be ill," Jonadab said. "When your father comes to see you, say to him, 'I would like my sister Tamar to come and give me something to eat. Let her prepare the food in my sight so I may watch her and then eat it from her hand.'" So we have a rather destructive and distressing admission from Amnon, son of David, that the desire of his heart is set upon incest. And all the more distressful is when we see Jonadab, son of Shimea, David's brother, another family member, giving him a means and an idea of how he can, through subterfuge, bring about this foul desire of his heart. So we have two folks that really are up to no good and who are going about doing things that are underhanded and sinful. Verse 6. So Amnon lay down and pretended to be ill. When the king came to see him, Amnon said to him, "I would like my sister Tamar to come and make some special bread in my sight, so I may eat it from her hand." David sent word to Tamar at the palace, "Go to the house of your brother Amnon and prepare some food for him." So Tamar went to the house of her brother Amnon, who was lying down. She took some dough, kneaded it, and made the bread in his sight and baked it. Then she took the pan and served him the bread. But he refused to eat. "Send everyone out of here," Amnon said. So everyone left him. Then Amnon said to Tamar, "Bring the food here into my bedroom so I may eat from your hand." And Tamar took the bread she had prepared and brought it to her brother Amnon in the bedroom. But when she took it to him to eat, he grabbed her and said, "Come to bed with me, my sister." Now it was common that family members would take care of each other, and so when David checked on his son, he requested that one of his family members come and make some food for him. He wasn't feeling well; he needed assistance. But this was all a ruse, guise given to him by another family member to trick her into a situation where he could act on his incestuous desires.
Could I ask where you are?
We are in chapter 13. We are moving now into verse 12.
Okay, I was ahead of you then. Thank you.
Yeah, we're in a very uncomfortable and frustrating and difficult passage, and it doesn't improve. Tamar, "Don't, my brother," she said to him. "Don't force me. Such a thing should not be done in Israel. Don't do this wicked thing. What about me? Where could I get rid of my disgrace? And what about you? You would be like one of the wicked fools in Israel. Please speak to the king. He will not keep me from being married to you." But he refused to listen to her, and since he was stronger than she, he raped her. And Amnon hated her with intense hatred. In fact, he hated her more than he had loved her. Amnon said to her, "Get up and get out." So she refuses, and realizing the situation, puts forth a situation that would not be allowable, but seeks to, if nothing else, buy her time, to steel herself, to think of a way out. Of course, David would not allow them to be married, but she says, she first points out that, this, in the land of Israel, the promised land, the dwelling place of God's people, this thing can't happen. This is forbidden, what you are seeking to do. Don't do this wicked thing. And she points out herself, what situation would this leave me in? As the societal structure is set, this would leave her in a very poor position. It would have been, according to Mosaic law, he as the rapist would have to pay a bride's payment and marry her, as was the Mosaic law. She is not betrothed, and so he would have to pay the bride's dowry and marry her, and she would have access to his entire assets for the rest of her life. This was done, and some people look at that and they decry, how can you force a victim to marry their rapist? And in this time, in that societal structure, it was an incredible deterrent. If you go about and rape someone, they then have access to your entire assets. You have to support them the rest of your life for what you have done. It elevates the one who has been made the victim within this structure, and it completely decreases the one who has done the abuse and the assault, where they are now financially and socially responsible for that person that they have assaulted. In this day and age, in our societal structure, it is a much different story. And so she points out, what if you have anything in you? What do you understand? What this will leave me? What place this will leave me in? You're going to act like one of these wicked fools. Speak to the king. He will not keep me from being married. She seeks to buy herself some time to steel herself for what is to come. She understands the situation she's in. And Amnon, being one who is clearly not in the right place and in the right mind, and is certainly not considering what is right and good, then hates her and demands that she leaves. Verse 16, "No," she said to him, "sending me away would be a greater wrong than what you have already done to me." It is in this place, what the abuse that has happened. It is now incumbent that he must pay for what he has done and support her due to what he has done. And to just say, you know, get out. I'm not going to take any responsibility for the abuse that I have done. She points out, you can't do this. That would be even a greater wrong. It's bad enough that you have done this, but it's even worse than what you're saying you're going to do. But he refused to listen to her. He called his personal servant and said, "Get this woman out of here and bolt the door after her." So his servant put her out and bolted the door after her. She was wearing a richly ornamented robe, for this was the kind of garment the virgin daughter of the king wore. Tamar put ashes on her head and tore the ornamented robe she was wearing. She put her hand on her head and went away, weeping aloud as she went. She goes about the outward signs of one who is in deep mourning. When there is a great loss or when there is a great tragedy, that they would place ashes upon their head, a reminder to themselves of their mourning, and a symbol to those who bore witness to that person that they were in mourning, that they're in a place of great grief. She rents her garment, and not just any garment, but the garment that signifies her place in society, the virgin daughter of the king, and she rips it as one who is in deep mourning. So if we look back, we see how David sought to hide his sin and went through great measures to have it hidden, and causing more and more sin. And we see sins of the father, sins of the son. We see the son who sought to, what would solve this is if I just say, go away. I'm not going to take responsibility. You're just going to have to leave, my word against you. And Tamar, an incredibly strong woman, is not going to have any of that. We see that she doesn't merely allow what was to happen. She protests and does all that she can to prevent. And then once it has occurred, she lets everybody know. She rends her garment. She assumes the position of one who is in mourning and allows her deep-seated feelings to come out. She's not merely going to allow what has happened to her to be swept under the rug. Her brother Absalom said to her, "Has that Amnon, your brother, been with you? Be quiet now, my sister. He is your brother. Don't take this thing to heart." I have to assume a well-meaning response. He doesn't want, he sees her in grief and doesn't want her to feel that way, but that is not a good response, at least in today's way of living and understanding. He understands what has taken place, and he tells her to calm down and to don't let it bother her, which this would, of course, be something that she cannot merely say, "I'm not going to let this bother me." But Tamar lived in her brother Absalom's house, a desolate woman. The societal structure did not give her a province to continue in such a way. There was no judgment that she could follow on her side of things, and so she didn't live in her father's house, she lived in her brother's house. Some commentary says because it would bring shame on her father's house, because not on her account, not that she is the bringer of shame, but it brings shame on the father for not preventing it, protecting. It was the place of the father to protect their children and their daughter, and the abuse and the attack that happened on her would bring shame on him. That even though he couldn't have prevented it in such a way, she didn't seek to bring shame on him for not preventing it, for not intervening in such a way. So she lived in her brother's house, and though his response was, "Don't let it bother you," he took care of her. He ensured, following that attack, that she was not going to be destitute. She may be desolate, she may be grieving, she may be in a terrible place, but she was not destitute. She had provision for herself. When King David heard all this, he was furious. There is a good response. fury, anger, that not only had there been incest, but there had been an attack, a rape amongst his children. Absalom never said a word to Amnon. From his response to Tamar, we could understand that. He's seeking to play the non-combative side. He never said a word, either good or bad. He hated Amnon because he had disgraced his sister Tamar. He was upset. Absalom was upset because of what happened to Tamar, but did not say anything. He did not respond at that time. But King David was furious. But we see also that David doesn't do anything either. That spirit that was with David before, who if the enemies of Israel were to go and react against Israel, he would take up arms and he would bring a war band and he would destroy them. But now he sits in his palace furious, angry, but we have no recorded that he did anything about this. He didn't march to Amnon's house and tear that door open and put justice at the feet of Amnon. And that's unfortunate. We see that spirit that we once saw in David is greatly diminished after this encounter, this choice that he made with Bathsheba. Verse 23, 2 years later, so 2 years have passed from this time, when Absalom's sheep shearers were at Baal Hazor near the border of Ephraim, he invited all the king's sons to come there. Absalom went to the king and said, "Your servant has had shearers come. Will the king and his officials please join me?" This was a time of perhaps celebration, of feasting and festival. That this was a time, a proper time to invite all the family over and to be near. "No, my son," the king replied. "All of us should not go. We should only be a burden to you." Although Absalom urged him, he still refused to go, but gave him his blessing. "No, we can't all get together, but may this be a good time for you. May this be festive." Then Absalom said, "If not, please let my brother Amnon come with us." The king asked him, "Why should he go with you?" But Absalom urged him, and so he sent with him Amnon and the rest of the king's sons. Finally, as children can be, they can be very persuasive and persistent, and finally goes, "Okay, fine, go on ahead." Absalom ordered his men, "Listen, when Amnon is in high spirits from drinking wine, and I say to you, strike Amnon down, then kill him. Don't be afraid. Have not I given you this order? Be strong and brave." He has been quiet up until this point. That he's not going to do anything out in public. He's not going to go do anything out in the moment, but it takes him 2 years to do any kind of response. Now, is this the right response? Perhaps not. But he makes a plan. He tells his servants, "When I say for you to do so, kill Amnon. Don't be afraid, because I'm the one giving you this order." He's telling them, I'll have your back, because it's going to be, it's not in a dark alley somewhere. This is going to be someplace where it will be known what they've done. So Absalom's men did to Amnon what Absalom had ordered. Then all the king's sons got up, mounted their mules, and fled. The host's servants come in and kill Amnon, and so they jump on their mounts and they leave. This isn't a situation where they continue to go about their business and say, "That's unfortunate, that's very strange, please pass the mutton." That's not at all going to be the situation. They leap upon their mounts and leave. While they were on their way, the report came to David the king, "Absalom has struck down all the king's sons. Not one of them is left." Now, is this an accurate report?
Not yet.
No. The report, as we can see in media and in our own conversations, word can be altered. There can be a hitch in the get along, change in the translation. Stretching the truth, yes. Someone says one thing and we don't quite hear it, but we kind of hear it in our own way and we pass that on to somebody else. Or if something occurs, something factual, something newsworthy, and it's true, but it doesn't really catch the ear. And so there might be a little change here and there and a little change here and there. Then it's put out. And so, you know, when we see on the news, I remember growing up, there was this, how they would promote, hey, you need to watch the news. There's something in your home right now that could kill you at any moment. Watch News at 11. And we're like, no, I need to know now. I don't want to rise from my armchair. I'm not going to wait 3 hours. You know, Andy Griffin may be on, and I do want to watch it, but I'm not going to sit here unmoving until you tell me what in my home could kill me right now. And it's something completely, you know, random, and it's not at all something to be worried about, you know.
There used to be a news reporter, maybe these people would remember, Gabriel Heater, come on at night. Oh, there's good news in the air tonight. That's what he always come on.
And there was a Channel 5 at home that would have, they would always end with something unbelievably good news. I mean, sometimes it may have been a really bad day, and so they would just have 3 minutes of a reporter at a animal shelter, just showing them puppies and things. And so where they weren't ending their news report with something horrible, like, okay, that's the news of the day. Here's the good news. And there would be something that so that it would close out, and it would be the actual good news, not a fluff puff piece, but something good that was going on. And because the news it can be heavy to take, so I appreciated that.
When Radon, I think that's the name.
Radon, yeah, coming up through the ground.
Yeah,
yeah.
when that first was come out, boy, golly, should you have a thing that would tell you if you have that
radon sensor.
Boy, that was like
lead paint and all this other stuff. And
how about the weed killers they have out? It's on every other 5 minutes. If you have it, you're going to get Parkinson's or something else.
If you or someone you love has ever come into contact with this, please contact the legal counsel at such and such. And so we have all these concerns. Information is transferred in one of two ways, accurately or inaccurately. And that's just how it is. And so the report came to King David, all of your sons that you have sent off are dead, and which is inaccurate. You know, that there was only one that was killed. And so as we continue, the king stood up. He tore his clothes and lay down on the ground, and all his servants stood by with their clothes torn. So we see again this imagery of one who is in mourning, the rending of one's garments to illustrate what is going on within. So that, you know, if you've ever been in a place of strong emotion and someone starts talking about something that you just don't care about, I wish you could tell what I'm feeling on the inside. And so in such a way, one in the room could see this person is in mourning or is in great grief. They've rent their garments. As you know, that garment will never be the same. You could fix it and sew it, but it will never be the same. And so this was a sign in this time of mourning. And what I think is incredible is there is this sign of solidarity from his servants. His servants, there with him, rend their garments.
They're supposed to.
They are, you know, and so it may be, all right, boys, let's tear our robes, but I see solidarity in that King David is not the only one in the room. When he looks around, he sees these signs of others in grief. That has to give some solace, I would hope, even though they have to do that. But Jonadab, son of Shimeah, a name that we recall, the name of the one who gave the idea to Amnon, David's brother, said, My Lord should not think that they are killed, all the princes. Only Amnon is dead. This has been Absalom's expressed intention ever since the day Amnon raped his sister Tamar. My lord the king should not be concerned about the report that all the king's sons are dead. Only Amnon is dead. Meanwhile, Absalom has fled. So we have little Jonadab here who's dipping into both pots here. He is the source of the idea, the espionage, the subterfuge that got Amnon to fulfill his urges. And he's also the one to belay the fears of the king. There's always that middleman. There's always someone in the middle who escapes responsibility and still gets to play the hero. May we be far from the middle in such cases. Now the man standing watch looked up and saw many people on the road west of him coming down the side of the hill. The watchman went and told the king, I see men in the direction of Horonaim on the side of the hill. Jonadab said to the king, see, the king's sons are here. It has happened just as your servant said. As he finished speaking, the king's sons came in, wailing loudly. The king, too, and all his servants wept very bitterly. They arrived at the palace, having borne witness to what occurred. Absalom's servants, at his order, killed Amnon. Now, they all knew what had occurred, but this was their brother. And to see someone attacked before you, it does something to you. So they, of course, as they should, they went to the king. And together they grieved. But Absalom, he's fled. Verse 37, Absalom fled and went to Talmai, son of Ammihud, the king of Geshur. But King David mourned for his son every day. After Absalom fled and went to Geshur, he stayed there 3 years. And the spirit of the king longed to go to Absalom, for he was consoled concerning Amnon's death. So much going on in the house of David. The sword will not depart from the house of David. There is he's grieving the loss of Amnon, and he's grieving being without Absalom. I'm sure he wanted to come to an understanding with Absalom. Why did you do this? What were your thoughts? He wanted to be there for his son. I'm sure he wanted to give a tongue lashing to his son for what he had done, to bring justice. But there is this conflicted feeling within David. There is just this violence and blood all about the house of David. How deeply troubling this must be for David, and we see it reflected in the Psalms. We see just the turmoil going on in David's life. So we continue with this account, this narrative of Absalom in chapter 14. Joab, son of Zeruiah, knew that the king's heart longed for Absalom. So Joab sent someone to Tekoa and had a wise woman brought from there. He said to her, pretend you are in mourning. Dress in mourning clothes and don't use any cosmetic lotions. Act like a woman who has spent many days grieving for the dead. Then go to the king and speak these words to him. And Joab put the words in her mouth. And so someone who is in a place of mourning is going to be receptive to someone else who is in a place of mourning. And so there is, once again, more of this secret subterfuge going on. When the woman from Tekoa went to the king, she fell with her face to the ground to pay him honor. And she said, help me, O king. The king asked her, what is troubling you? She said, I am indeed a widow. My husband is dead. I, your servant, had 2 sons. They got into a fight with each other in the field, and no one was there to separate them. One struck the other and killed him. Now the whole clan has risen up against your servant. They say, hand over the one who struck his brother down, so that we may put him to death for the life of his brother whom he killed. Then we will get rid of the heir as well. They would put out the only burning coal I have left, leaving my husband neither name nor descendant on the face of the earth. Now this is not a true story. This is a fable given to this woman from Tekoa by Joab. The king said to the woman, go home and I will issue an order on your behalf. She's asking that an order be given that the son who killed her other son not be put to death by those who are crying for it and seeking David to give an order on behalf of her. But the woman from Tekoa said to him, my lord the king, let the blame rest on me and on my father's family, and let the king and his throne be without guilt." The king replied, "If anyone says anything to you, bring him to me, and he will not bother you again." She said, "Then let the Lord invoke the Lord his God to prevent the avenger of blood from adding to the destruction, so that my son will not be destroyed." Again, we bring the Lord into business that the Lord has no business being in. The name of the Lord is to be exalted. It's needing to be given respect and reverence, and so not to be used in a ploy to influence the king. We've seen this before, and has it ever turned out well? As in our study of 1st and 2nd Samuel, it hasn't, not once. "As surely as the Lord lives," King David said, "not one hair of your son's head will fall to the ground." Then the woman said, "Let your servant speak a word to my lord the king." "Speak," he replied. The woman said, "Why then have you devised a thing like this against the people of God? When the king says this, does he not convict himself, or the king has not brought back his banished son? Like water spilled on the ground, which cannot be recovered, so we must die. But God does not take away life. Instead, he devises ways so that a banished person may not remain estranged from him. And now I have come to say this to my lord the king, because the people have made me afraid. Your servant thought, I will speak to the king. Perhaps he will do what his servant asked. Perhaps the king will agree to deliver his servant from the hand of the man who is trying to cut off both me and my son from the inheritance God gave us. And now your servant says, may the word of my lord the king bring me rest, for my lord the king is like an angel of God in discerning good and evil. May the Lord your God be with you. Then the king said to the woman, do not keep from me the answer to which I am going to ask you. He prefaces this, I'm going to ask you a very important question, and you need to tell me. Let my lord the king speak, the woman said. The king asked, isn't the hand of Joab with you in all this? The king knows exactly where this is coming from. When it all kind of is laid out, and this discourse that she just says, it's known to David in some way who this is coming from. That there is more to this story than what is being explained. And what is interesting to me is that she shares a little bit of the truth and the reasoning why, yet still refers back to that fabricated story that she's going on about. And it's strange. We have to kind of look at it as like we saw with the killing of Abner, this blood feud. You killed my brother, so I'm going to kill you. And the brother of the person who killed that person's brother has to kill them. And so we have the Hatfields and McCoys. We have this blood debt, and a very similar situation of this revenge. And it's this imagery of like water poured out on the ground, it can't be recovered. You can't go back and take back the words that you say. You can't take back the actions that you've done, just as water spilled on the ground can never be taken back. And it's a very convoluted kind of situation to be in. We have Joab trying to get his way and influence things, and the king says, isn't this the hand of Joab with you in this? The woman answered, as surely as you live, my lord the king, no one can turn to the right or to the left from anything my lord the king says. Yes, it was your servant Joab who instructed me to do this, and who put all these words into the mouth of your servant. Your servant Joab did this to change the present situation. My Lord has wisdom like that of an angel of God. He knows everything that happens in the land. Again, she refers to him as this angel of God. He is this superhuman, all-powerful, he has discernment and strength and all this. I'm not sure if this is flattery or if this is just reflective of, compared to the common person, you as a king can get a lot done. So one way or the other, she's appealing to the fact that he is the king in all of this. And so it could be either one. The king said to Joab, very well, I will do it. Go and bring back the young man, Absalom. Now, he said to Joab, we have to ponder if Joab is there. Has he been present the whole time? There's nothing explicit, but I wouldn't imagine that that Joab isn't there. So we don't have any if he's been there the whole time, or if he during this conversation, this is the hand of Joab. Go get Joab. But we see in this next verse, Joab fell with his face to the ground to pay him honor, and he blessed the king. Joab said, "Today your servant knows that he has found favor in your eyes, my lord the king, because the king has granted his servant's request." So, for whatever reason, Joab is now present. And I would imagine that he's been there the whole time. That as the story comes out, and right there he goes, looks over at Joab. "Joab, this is you, isn't it? All of this is coming from you." And so he addresses Joab because he knows, though that he is speaking to this wise woman, I'm really talking to Joab. And so he says to him, "I will do it. Bring back the young man Absalom." And so Joab, having gotten his way through a rather surreptitious way, thanks the king. Then Joab went to Geshur and brought Absalom back to Jerusalem. But the king said, "He must go to his own house. He must not see my face." So Absalom went to his own house and did not see the face of the king. He is either too frustrated, disgusted, distraught to see Absalom on one hand, or he doesn't want to give Absalom any good sort of feeling, because I'm sure Absalom wants to see his father. He goes, "I don't want to see him. He's got to go to his own house." Either because David doesn't want to see him, or he doesn't want to give Absalom the opportunity to see him. So he sends him to his own house. In all Israel, there was not a man so highly praised for his handsome appearance as Absalom. From the top of his head to the sole of his foot, there was no blemish in him. Whenever he cut the hair of his head, he used to cut his hair from time to time when it became too heavy for him. He would weigh it, and its weight was 200 shekels by the royal standard. Now that's like 5 pounds. You think in a year or so, someone growing 5 pounds of hair, that's incredible. No wonder. Well, I cut my hair because it's got too heavy. Well, if I had an extra 5 pounds hanging off my head, I'd cut it too. I understand that. So Absalom is a looker. He is handsome and charming. Kind of the first time we hear about this. 3 sons and a daughter were born to Absalom. The daughter's name was Tamar, and she became a beautiful woman. Absalom took his sister Tamar into his house, took care of her, and named his daughter Tamar in honor of his sister, no doubt. It's very, very obvious that there was the line of thought in all of this. Now that's, I feel like in the beginning he didn't react well, but this is moving toward the right step, taking care of Tamar, naming his daughter after her. I think there's honorableness in that. Absalom lived 2 years in Jerusalem without seeing the king's face. King David is serious about this. This is not at all something that he is taking lightly. He doesn't get to see the king. Then Absalom sent for Joab in order to send him to the king. They have a good relationship, it would appear. But Joab refused to come out to him. So he sent a second time, but he refused to come. Then he said to his servants, "Look, Joab's field is next to mine, and he has barley there. Go and set it on fire." So Absalom's servants set the field on fire. Well, now, that's one way to get an attention. So, you've got kin that live close by. It's family land, and they live close. And you're just trying to get supper made, and they just keep calling. And they have to know it's supper time, and you're, the oil's burning, and you're trying to get the rolls in the oven, and they're trying to get a hold of you because you wouldn't believe what so-and-so said to so-and-so, and they're trying to get your attention. So in order to get your attention, they set your fields on fire. That's one way to do it. I wouldn't recommend it. Maybe send them a text. Maybe go by and knock on the door. But I guess they didn't have that kind of thing back in this day. And so Absalom, impulsive, ruggedly handsome, but unbelievably impulsive, but always at the wrong time, Absalom sets Joab's fields on fire. Absalom said to Joab, "Look, I sent word to you and said, 'Come here, so I can send you to the king to ask, why have I come from Geshur? It would be better for me if I were still there. Now then, I want to see the king's face, and if I'm guilty of anything, let him put me to death.'" Well, you're guilty of first setting Joab's fields on fire. Let's address that first. But I digress. Joab comes out to handle this emergency. His fields are on fire, and he's like, "Well, I got you here. Well, funny, we're meeting here. I have something I need to tell you." It would seem that it would just have been easier to just butt his way into the king's presence rather than going through this business with Joab. So Joab went to the king so that any more fields wouldn't burn, no doubt, I'm sure. So Joab went to the king and told him this. Then the king summoned Absalom, and he came in and bowed down with his face to the ground before the king, and the king kissed Absalom. There's a little bit of a reconciliation happening with there. Family is indeed family. And so we see this reunion of he wanted to see his father again. To either know without a shadow of a doubt that David hated him, or to know that there was still some kind of positive feeling. And we see that the king kissed Absalom, that he does care for him. We'll continue with chapter 15. We have some time. So in the course of time, a phrase we hear frequently, in the course of time, after a while, Absalom provided himself with a chariot and horses and 50 men to run ahead of him. He would get up early and stand by the side of the road leading to the city gate. Whenever anyone came with a complaint to be placed before the king for a decision, Absalom would call out to him, "What town are you from?" He would answer, "Your servant is from one of the tribes of Israel." Then Absalom would say to him, "Look, your claims are valid and proper, but there is no representative of the king to hear you." And Absalom would add, "If only I were appointed judge in the land, then everyone who has a complaint or case could come to me, and I would see that it gets justice." How very convenient. Well, there's no one up there to help you, brother. If only I'd help you. I'd help you out there. I'd get this complaint figured out. So whenever anyone approached him to bow down before him, Absalom would reach out his hand, take hold of him, and kiss him. Absalom behaved in this way toward all the Israelites who came to the king asking for justice. And so he stole the hearts of the men of Israel. He just charmed them. "I'm your champion. I'm your buddy. I'll help you out." Not to mention he's a strong, strapping young man and doesn't have the face like the underside of a garden stone. So at the end of 4 years, Absalom said to the king, "Let me go to Hebron and fulfill a vow I made to the Lord. While your servant was living in Geshur in Aram, I made this vow. If the Lord takes me back to Jerusalem, I will worship the Lord in Hebron." And the king said to him, "Go in peace." So he went to Hebron. Seems normal enough. He's just, I need to go to Hebron. Then Absalom sent secret messengers through the tribes of Israel to say, "As soon as you hear the sound of the trumpets, then say, 'Absalom is king in Hebron.'" 200 men from Jerusalem had accompanied Absalom. They had been invited as guests and went quite innocently, knowing nothing about the matter. While Absalom was offering sacrifices, he also sent for Ahithophel, the Gilonite, David's counselor, to come to Gilo, his hometown, and so the conspiracy gained strength, and Absalom's following kept on increasing. What a sneak! What a sneak! He is going through all these back channels, trying to seek for himself a way of gaining more power and strength. I'm not a big fan of this Absalom guy. You know, I just when I think he's gaining some favor and he's doing all right, he does something else that makes me go, I'm not a fan of you. He could have protected his sister, but he didn't. And then he goes and 2 years later kills him and gets everybody in a tizzy. And then he's invited back and he sees the face of his father, and his father, you know, they have this reconciliation. And now he's trying to do all of this backdoor working to get himself in power. Not a fan of this Absalom guy. Verse 13, a messenger came and told David, the hearts of the men of Israel are with Absalom. Then David said to all his officials who were with him in Jerusalem, come, we must flee, or none of us will escape from Absalom. We must leave immediately, or he will move quickly to overtake us and bring ruin upon us and put the city to the sword. He knows what Absalom is after, and it's him. And if there is an uprising and they put up a fight, well, there's going to be innocents who are going to be in the way. That they will come in and they will siege and they will raid, and civilians will be in danger. It's better if we just get ourselves out of the city now, protect ourselves, but also the lives of others. The king's officials answered him, your servants are ready to do whatever our lord the king chooses. Those are good officials. The king set out with his entire household following him, but he left 10 concubines to take care of the palace. So the king set out with all the people following him, and they halted at a place some distance away. All his men marched past him, along with all the Kerethites and the Pelethites, and all the 600 Gittites who had accompanied him from Gath marched before the king. So you'll remember in the land of Gath, that was the Philistine territory. He had people who he had brought in under him himself in a war band, and so those are those as well as others who he had encountered along the way. They marched ahead. The king said to Ittai the Gittite, why should you come along with us? Go back and stay with King Absalom. You're a foreigner, an exile from your homeland. You came only yesterday, and today shall I make you wander about with us? When do I not know where I'm going? Go back and take your countrymen. Make kindness and faithfulness be with you. He does a service. He goes, you have no allegiance to me. You know, you just arrived. Why don't you head on back? But Ittai replied to the king, as surely as the Lord lives, and as my lord the king lives, wherever my lord the king may be, wherever it means life or death, there will your servant be. Now that's what loyalty looks like. Of a foreigner who really has no real allegiance, he has political allegiance, swears to serve David, whereas his own son Absalom is quite doing the opposite. David said to Ittai, go ahead, march on. So Ittai the Gittite marched on with all his men and the families that were with him. So he has a political draw from Gath, and some arrive the day before they leave. As some are probably sent back, other detachments are sent to come be a part of David's army and the forces that he has access to. And these guys arrive. This leader, Ittai, and his men show up, and the next day they're like, we got to get out of here. And he gives them an out. He's like, if you want to go back where you were exiled from your land to come here, you can go back, be with King Absalom. David just admits, look, I know I can see the writing on the wall. I know it's going to happen. And as a sign of true loyalty, he says, no, I'm serving you, my allegiance to you. And wherever you go, I'm going to go. The whole countryside wept aloud, and all the people passed by. The king also crossed the Kidron Valley, and all the people moved on towards the desert. His people, his subjects, they see him leaving. They know something's up, and they go with him. Zadok was there too, and all the Levites who were with him were carrying the Ark of the Covenant of God. So on their way out, they grabbed the Ark, no doubt using the poles as they should, having learned the lesson when they brought it to Jerusalem. They set down the Ark of God, and Abiathar offered sacrifices until all the people had finished leaving the city. So Abishai and Abiathar and all those who had served at the ark continue. And the king said to Zadok, take the ark of God back into the city. If I find favor in the Lord's eyes, he will bring me back and let me see it and his dwelling place again. But if he says, I am not pleased with you, then I am ready. Let him do to me whatever seems good to him. Now there's that David that we want to see. You know, if the Lord has favor on me, then I'll come back to the ark. The ark doesn't need to come with me. It needs to stay in Jerusalem. And if the Lord doesn't have favor on me, then may it be so. Let the Lord's will be done. The king also said to Zadok the priest, aren't you a seer? Go back to the city in peace with your son Ahimaaz and Jonathan son of Abiathar. You and Abiathar take your 2 sons with you. I will wait at the fords in the desert until word comes from you to inform me. So Zadok and Abiathar took the ark of God back to Jerusalem and stayed there. And they said, look, it is your place to serve at the ark. So go where the ark is going to be. They're certainly not going to come after you. They're coming for me. So you're safe. There's no need for you to go out into the wilderness and have all this uncertainty. Go back to what you're used to and what your place is and your relative safety within the walls of Jerusalem and serve there. But David continued up the Mount of Olives, weeping as he went. His head was covered, and he was barefoot. And all the people with him covered their heads too and were weeping as they went up. So they're grieving. They're leaving their home, their situation they're in. This is not an easy slog either, coming up out of Jerusalem, up the Mount of Olives. Now David had been told, Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. So David prayed, O Lord, turn Ahithophel's counsel into foolishness. You know, may the words that he's giving to Absalom just be rubbish. When David arrived at the summit where people used to worship God, Hushai the Archite was there to meet him, his robe torn and dust on his head. He's grieving too. David said to him, if you go with me, you will be a burden to me. But if you return to the city and say to Absalom, I will be your servant, O king. I was your father's servant in the past, but now I will be your servant. Then you can help me by frustrating Ahithophel's advice. Won't the priests Zadok and Abiathar be there with you? Tell them anything you hear in the king's palace. Their 2 sons, Ahimaaz, son of Zadok, and Jonathan, son of Abiathar, are there with them. Send them to me with anything you hear. So David's friend Hushai arrived at Jerusalem as Absalom was entering the city. So now he says, look, you're going to be my inside man. You're going to let me know what's going on here. Because David cares greatly for Jerusalem. I'm sure he cares greatly for Absalom as well, whatever this business is, but he knows he needs to get out if things are going to be safe. And he sends people who he knows will be safe and need to do what they need to do. He sends them back there to Jerusalem. Right as Absalom is entering the city. There's no fight. There's no bloodshed because David relinquishes the city to Absalom. So there won't be any bloodshed. He could have fought back. He could have reasoned, but he chose to do what would be peaceful. I'm sure he knew the heart of his son Absalom. There was going to be a fight. And he knew that he would be on the losing side because while people were loyal to David, Absalom was dashing. He was the one solving people's problems. And there was going to be people who were going to be, as we see, very loyal to him. And so his number would have fought at his very word, Absalom's loyal followers. So to prevent any bloodshed, David surrenders the city to Absalom, the usurper, his own son, Absalom. And so we will continue with chapter 16 next week. Things are ramping up. The drama is growing. This business of the house of David, as Nathan prophesied, is really coming to pass before our very eyes. So I'm eager to see what happens next. Let's close in prayer. Lord, we thank you that you're present with us. We thank you that you extend your hand to us and allow us to bear witness to how you worked with your people in past ages and how we bear witness in our own lives, how you work with us and dwell within us and reveal to us your ways. May we be people who show your glory and shine your light to the world around us. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.